Good morning, or depending on your time zone, good afternoon, and welcome to our CB BankAnalytics member orientation and demo. My name is Jeff Rigsby. I'm the president and CEO of CB Resource, and I will be conducting today's session. By the way, welcome everybody. I know we have some new folks. I know we have some folks that have been with us for a while, so thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate it. I think we mentioned it's going to run about an hour. It is somewhat granular in nature, but we'll see how it flows. And let's go ahead and get started. And before we do that, though, just to make sure we get the most out of this time together, as we go through the session, if you have a question as it relates to an app or something I'm walking through, by all means, you can use the instant message mechanism, and that'll catch my eye, and we can address your questions in real time. We'll also have a brief Q&A at the conclusion of this session. We're also recording the session, so it will be available through the CB BankAnalytics portal, or if you want a link sent to you. So this will be available to you and to associates at the company, and for future applications. So what are we going to cover today? So what I would like to do is do a quick walk around. We have pretty much redesigned the portal and the system. So I do want to take a brief moment and just walk through, and we'll just pull it up and do what I would call a quick walk around. And then what I do want to point out is the new design of the app, of the portal itself, is a responsive web design. So though it's not in app version yet, it should work well on tablets. And believe it or not, it will even work on your phone, though somewhat interestingly. But it is a responsive site, and I think you'll find that beneficial if you happen to be a user of a tablet, for example. But what we're going to do is do a quick walk around. I do want to just touch on what's new and feature that a little bit. And then literally just kind of walk through the apps. We'll walk through each of the functional apps, and we will start with how the favorite bank item works, how to create your peer groups, things of that nature, and then we'll dive right in. One of the things I do want to point out, if you really think about the portal, and regardless of your roles or responsibilities at the bank, and many of you actually take advantage of all of our products and services, and that's great. Some of you are subscribers to CB BankAnalytics. Some of you are just capital plan, strategic plan, ERM, or all of the above. But when you start thinking about the functionality and what the portal is really there to do for you, it really primarily serves two roles, right? I mean, if you're in planning mode, whether it's strategic or capital planning, there are specific applications that can enhance or support your ability to do what you're trying to get done, right? And then we also have our risk management applications, and some of them are actually crossover, to be honest. And then you have something like the Call Report Analyzer, which is just there to do any kind of deep dive. But this thing is really designed, regardless of your position, whether you're the bank CEO in a C-suite position, in an analyst position, this is really designed to be user-friendly, to be in app form, so you can pretty much log in and lock and load. So when you think about the planning function, so for those of you who are attending today, and most of your world revolves around the planning side of it, just keep an eye as we go through each of the applications. But the strategic forecasting tool is a great model to do some what if scenarios that really drills down into things, whether it's growth rate, earnings, capital adequacy, market value, and earnings per share type detail. You can run multiple scenarios, compare them side by side, and we'll get into that obviously further. The gap analyzer you'll find, and that's this guy down here in the lower right when we log in. The gap analyzer monetizes ratios. You can, if you're currently at a 1 ROA and you want to move to a 1.7 or whatever the number might be, it will calculate and monetize any ratio that you're currently looking at, whether you want to move around portfolio mix, if you were looking at liquidity, applications. Any kind of ratio that's out there, it will convert it to dollars, and that's a useful tool. The bank versus bank analyzer allows you to compare your bank to others in key income statement and balance sheet areas, but it also has a very useful device that can allow you to do a quick merge of the two entities, yours and a target, and you can kind of see how that rolls out. It's not an M&A tool per se in the sense of doing detail analytics, but it does allow you to combine the banks. It does allow you to look at revised ratios. And then because everything is exportable into Excel, it allows you to actually start doing your own modeling, if you will. And continuing along the planning standpoint, whether it's strategic planning or capital planning, we have our capital risk analyzer, and that allows you to look at capital adequacy as it relates to your overall risk profile of the bank. We'll get into that. And then the performance analyzer, which is up here in the right-hand corner, literally from a strategic planning standpoint, if you're looking at banks in your market, or if you're just analyzing what's going on in the marketplace from 8 key market drivers, it'll show you how that works. And I'll get into that a little deeper, but these other areas do function well for planning. But if all of a sudden you're saying, hey, I'm in planning, what do I really want to sit up and take notice to in this session? By all means, move your seat closer to the screen when we drop into those 5. And from a risk management standpoint, all of these apps are useful for risk management. But I would say both key risk trends and performance benchmarks are similar. But if you're doing tracking and reporting from an ERM perspective, or from just a risk management perspective, and you want to do a deeper dive from a comparative analysis standpoint, it breaks it down by credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity risk, price risk, strategic risk, and we have over 140 KRIs that you can do comparative analysis with, and I'll show you kind of functionally how that works. But if you're in the risk management side of business and you're looking at quantitative analysis, by all means, both key risk trends and benchmarking is very useful. The capital risk analyzer is also a key component to aligning your capital requirements with the bank's risk profile. And so, though many of these cross and do interactively work well together, I just wanted to point out, if you come from a certain background, you may find that a certain suite of applications are more useful to you than others. My only other comment is just in sense of this thing is really designed to be user-friendly. You don't need to be an analyst, and we're not suggesting we're SNL, but if you want to drive down and do some quick analysis, this is really designed for anyone to use. And so for those of you who work at a bank and you have other folks that just want to have easy access to do some quick calculations or quick analysis, it's very user-friendly, and your user license allows you to have as many users on the system as you like. So by all means, share it. You can have them watch this video afterwards, and we can go from there. So let's go ahead and do that quick walk around. And one of the things I did want to talk about was just kind of what's new, and for those of you who are familiar with the system, and then I'll jump to the site. The 2 newest additions to the new look and feel is the CBR Performance Index, which is this item on the left, and then we also now have capital and market data available. So if you happen to be a trading bank stock, whether you're trading over-the-counter pink sheet or NASDAQ or on a bigger board, we now have complete stock market or external analysis. So these are the 2 newbies that I'll be walking you through as we move over to the website. And but let's go ahead and just shift over, if you don't mind. I'm going to pull it into CB BankAnalytics, and let's go ahead and do the overall walk around. And just for purposes of demo, I know nobody's sitting on this call from Citizens Business Bank. We're not getting into any particular confidential or privacy data. It's just public data. But just for the purposes of the demo, you'll see Citizens Bank being used. And I hope you guys don't mind. If somebody wants to nominate their own bank to be used, just let me know. But let's go ahead and do a quick walk around. So you've logged into the system. And for those of you, if we want to go ahead and back up to the very beginning of this whole thing, when you log on, pretty simple, right? You'll see the logon page, username driven, put in your password, and you're in. Okay, and the first thing you're going to see is your bank and your FDIC number, where you're located. If you have a holding company, it'll be there. If you're trading, your stock ticker symbol will be there. Branch network, head count, and the type of corporation you are. But kind of right off the bat, the first 2 things that are just here for good general knowledge, you can pop in anytime. The CB Performance Index is a look at your bank, or any other bank for that matter, who might be saved into your favorites, that takes 8 factors into consideration, force ranks them, and creates, in essence, a scorecard, and ranks you against a peer group you would fit into. So just to give you an idea, so the index rolls it up. For Citizens Business Bank, they're between a $10 and $100 billion bank. And you can see quarter over quarter, they've been number 8, 777 all the way through. So it's kind of ranking them based on their score. And what went into that ranking was how they performed from an asset growth standpoint, return on average assets, return on average equity, net interest margin, efficiency ratio, non-performing assets, non-interest bearing deposits, and non-interest income. And you can toggle back and forth and look at either. But what this index is really all about is looking at performance on a balanced perspective, suggesting that these 8 factors, growth, income, return on equity, net interest margin, efficiency, asset quality, non-interest bearing deposit, which tend to be sticky and low cost, and non-interest income, are 8 key value drivers. So we take those 8 key value drivers and we create a scorecard, and low score pushes you up the list when it's aggregated. So that's the high level. So all you need to do is click on View Details. And so here you go. The first thing it defaults to is that peer group. And you can see that the bank is identified, in this case, is number 7. But it does list all the banks that are on the list. And in this case, there's about 107 banks. So if you happen to be this particular bank, you can see you're in the top decile. But if you want to see where you are by state, it will also put you in state. Now that's putting everybody in there. You might find banks of different size may move you up or down the list, but you can look at a state comparison. You can also look at your bank on a regional basis, and regional is territorial and indicate what region you're in, or even on a national basis. So if you want to look at how you rank against, I don't know, I think, are we at 5,700 or whatever the number is? But this just rolled up to every bank in the system. So we have 5,455 banks in the system. And just so you guys know, we do have about 20 million bank records in our system. As many of you are familiar, it updates quarterly and the data's there. So anyway, in a nutshell, though, it's just an interesting point. If you want to see where you rank or other banks, you can tie into the CBR Performance Index. And it will always default to your bank. But if you say banks in your favorites, you can also see if you have a favorite bank or whatever that you want to check out and take a look at, you can always roll back to that. It also defaults to you if you trade in stock. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we talk about, I mentioned strategic planning. The other factor you may want to be able to tap into is market intelligence from the market's perspective, right? So in this case, Citizens does trade. It's an SEC filing bank. And not sure why that's so slow, but you do get detailed stock performance. Now, what's kind of handy about having this in here, not only do we have market intelligence from a stock market standpoint, but this also gives us an opportunity to present financial data at the holding company level, correct? So if you're looking for holding company data specifically, it does have holding company financial performance, both income statement and related. You also have, detailed share information, key performance ratios, and other market intelligence, right? So to the extent you want to see how your bank is sizing up or other banks that you happen to be analyzing, all of the data is here and tied into our system. We also have all your current filings, news and press releases, and general market intelligence. So that, again, was one of the new apps that has been added. And really what we're doing is looking to develop additional information that you would find useful in addition to our planning apps and access to your products that we work with. When we say coming soon, we are in the midst of developing an economic application that will be coming online. We're currently wrapping up a partnership to be announced soon. And you'll have state, local, and national economic data available at your fingertip. And that's why these 3 guys kind of run across the top. They're kind of macro intelligence things that in many cases may update more frequently than quarterly, as obviously as market intelligence does. And then just to kind of complete our walk around, for those of you who do work with us, and whether it's capital planning, strategic planning, enterprise risk management, here's your access point, right? So you can always click on And as far as accessing your capital plan documents, risk models that we work with, research that we work with, all of your information is here. To the extent you're locking and loading and moving information backwards and forwards in a very safe and secure environment, we do have that available to you. So it's just easy to go to the portal, and your most recent plan documents, your most recent information that you would be exchanging with our team would be in one of those file folders. Also worth mentioning, and it's in development now, but one of our partner firms is Finance 500, and we are doing a little market test with them. But to the extent you're either interested in understanding what broker deposit pricing looks like today, or even evaluating or even issuing a CD, that is in beta form now, and will be a service we'll be offering to Finance 500's folks or their customers, as well as ours, to the extent they want that app turned on. But again, very handy, real time. You'll be able to take a look at what current rates are, and actually, to the extent you want to, get a quote on a term and a callable feature and all the other data, you can input all of your information and issue from this point of contact. So that's in the solutions. We'll get into how we use peer groups and creating peer groups shortly, but there's your access to your peer groups. And we'll always have the CV Bulletin most recent version up here. So our clipping service is always running. And to the extent you want to see some recent articles or trends that are going on in the industry, you'll always have access to the bulletin at your fingertip. The only other place I want to feature before we jump into the balance of our time together in the demo is our help section, right? And this is where you'll find this recorded version of our training. But to the extent you're working any one of the apps, or if you're just curious as to what the ratio definitions are, you can click on these points at any time, and it will have support for using our applications, running tutorials, or even how to build custom peer groups. So we do have a library of instructions to the site. So feel free to go into the Help Center for additional support. And if that doesn't help, our toll-free number is right there, and you can certainly call us. Well, I'll say anything but 24/7, right? But we are available to support any questions you might have. So with that, that's kind of an overview of the latest look and feel. And as I mentioned, the system is now a responsive website. So if you happen to go on your iPad, or you're using a tablet or a desktop or a notebook or something big, smaller than a desktop, the site should respond well, and it should function well. So let's go ahead and spend the balance of our time just walking around the apps, right? And we currently have 9 functioning apps on the portal. And as you can see, we have the single bank profile, key risk trends, performance analyzer, benchmark performance, capital risk analyzer, bank versus bank analyzer, strategic forecast, call report analyzer, and the gap analyzer. And if you recall, I mentioned to you whether you're into the planning side or the risk management side, I'm going to go around the horn because it's just a logical direction to go. But to the extent you're in one of those areas, I'll kind of feature that or call that out when we get to it. But one of the first things that a lot of our users use the portal for is peer group analysis, right? So let's start there. And first of all, you can have as many peer groups as you like. So if you go to managing your peers on the lower left side of the portal, you can hit manage peers. I've got a bunch of them, but you can have as many custom peer groups as you like based on any reason that you want to have them. But this is your file folder where you can have peer groups. If you like to keep an eye on certain banks and you want to keep them in a file folder, you can also have a file folder for your favorite banks. And you can also go to this point to find a bank. The functionality of this was spread out to make finding banks easier. So that is also something that's been improved. But let's go ahead and just create a simple peer group as a first step when you're coming into the portal. It's defaulted to you, and you want to create a simple peer group. So you'd go up to the right-hand corner, hit the green button, and let's just say that you are a bank in, choose one of the banks we have in here. I know one of you are at least in Texas. And so you can go ahead and choose your location. You can go ahead and let's just say you happen to be between 500 and 99. Now you can set up any criteria, but I'm just keeping it simple for this demo. And you can also say, you know what, I just want to look at C Corps or S Corps or both. And we'll say, I just want to look at, I'm going to look at both. And in that case, just immediately hit search, and all of those banks that came up within that criteria are there. Now, at this point, you can literally just click and point and choose spots here and choose the banks you want to add to the peer group. But here's what I do, and so here's a little inside tip that I would suggest everybody do when you're building your peer group. Go ahead and oops, of course I did that. I messed up. So let me back up for a second. Let's go to Texas again. And we'll go to 500 to 9, and we'll hit search. There they are. I'm going to always suggest you just export it to an Excel spreadsheet. These spreadsheets are downloaded pretty quickly. And it is downloading. And so right off the bat, the reason why it's worth downloading the spreadsheet is not only does it list the banks that are in the group, but it has key indicators or key factors that you might want to consider in terms of selecting your group, which could be anything from your corporate size to your asset size, number of branches, how many employees you have, where you're physically located, things like growth, asset quality, keeps continuing to go out there, non-interest bearing deposits, ROA, ROE, net interest margin, efficiency, and other factors you may find in helping you select a peer group. Once you've selected your peer group, and I'm just going to do this randomly and say we're doing it by asset size, all you need to do is grab the RSSD number, save it, or hit copy, go back to the portal, hit the green button again, drop it in there, and just name it, right? Test PG. And if you want that to be your default group, which is where you want to use as a tracking mechanism for you, you can hit default, or you could just save it. I'm going to go ahead and just save it because I've got another peer group we're using for the demo. But pretty straightforward. Hit the green button, select your criteria. If you're looking at multiple groups, you can download every bank in the system in about 20 seconds. So, but that peer group is made, and you now have a working peer group, and it will be in your peer group file folder. And you can always come in here and edit the peer group. You can delete a peer group, things of that nature. Okay, so that's pretty much how you create a peer group, and you can have as many as you want. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the apps themselves. Starting with Single Bank Profile. This is pretty much a simple tool that is a one-pager on your bank or any bank you want to look at, right? And to the left, you have key performance data. So in this case, highlighting balance sheet performance, highlighting income, earnings and performance, asset quality, capital ratios, and liquidity. And you have a quick history. You can look at year over year. You can look at quarter over quarter. The system is pretty quick. And as you look at each one of those, it will also give you a trend line, right? So you can look at asset growth, loan growth, deposit growth, bank equity, and then portfolio composition. So if you want to take a look quickly at what the loan portfolio composition is or the deposit portfolio composition is, it's right there. So if you ever need a one-pager, these are typically useful for a quick board meeting. A key customer might be interested in how things are looking, perhaps an investor, or anybody else that you feel would be useful, a top customer where a one-pager is helpful. Some of the other factors are you can download it to PDF. You can also download it to Excel. You can save this to favorites. I'll cover what saving to favorites is later. But if you have a number of banks that you have saved to favorites, they'll be right here. So if, for example, you happen to be a CEO of the bank, and let's say you like 4 or 5 banks you like to keep an eye on, save them to your favorites, and you can come here and you can just pop to them as quickly as you like, and their data will come right up. And you can get a one-pager on any bank you're just interested in looking at. This is also helpful if there's key banks that you're looking at that you might compete with or things of that nature. The other nice factor here is not only can you move quickly from one bank to another, but it also is linked to their website. So if you want to learn more because you're using this as a strategic planning tool, it'll actually take you right to their website. So that's also a link that's built into Single Bank Profile. So again, nice one-pager, year over year or quarter over quarter analysis at kind of a fingertip. Okay. So let's go back. Now, the next one is key risk trends. And in the interest of time, because there's some common functionality between the key risk trends and the benchmark performance. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and use benchmark performance and talk about the difference. But key risk indicators works the same way. The difference between key risk performance and the benchmark tool is the benchmark tool allows you to benchmark. And so that's this column here. So the first thing I want to point out when you go into whether it's key risk indicators or benchmark performance is that there's over 140 KRIs or key risk indicators for bank analysis purposes, right? And then you can tab through credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity and price risk, and strategic risk. And I'm just going to go back here to strategy or to credit. You'll also notice that you'll be able to turn things on. I'll cover that for a second. If you have multiple peer groups, you can change your peer group here. Or if you want to change the bank you're using to analyze with, it's the base bank, you can change that there as well. And you can always export this data to Excel. But let's just talk a little bit about some things you might want to benchmark. So in this case, Citizens Bank has a yield of 4.19 on their overall total loans and leases portfolio. The next column you're going to see is your custom peer group. That's that peer group that we have for this bank. The third column is the UBPR peer group. And so this will always default to your UBPR peer group as well as your custom peer group. And if you wanted to add a line of data and you wanted to start benchmarking, let's just say their policy is really 4.5. Now all of a sudden it will show you where you have a variance, either favorable, neutral, or an adverse variance, right? So in this case it's glowing red because that's less than where they want, or that's greater than where they want to be. So if they're at 4.19, they want to get to 4.5, it shows you that variance. If you want to turn off the data that's showing peer data and you just want to look at your benchmarks, you can turn the trend charts off, or you can leave the peer data on. Now what's useful, particularly on an ERM basis, for those of you that are doing enterprise risk management, not only does it show you your trend, your custom peer group trend, and your UBPR peer group trend, it gives you the detail of all banks and where you rank within the group. And many of you know, particularly when it comes to risk management, and these charts are risk weighted, the further down the list you go may actually be reflecting the greater your risk. So let's use ALLL as a factor in this peer group. So you can see that the bank is at 0.82 for their loan loss reserves. The peer average is 0.8, and the UBPR average is 0.84. And you can see the higher the ALLL level, the higher you are on the list. The lower the ALLL level, the lower you are on the risk, implying a certain level of risk assumption, correct? So that's kind of how that function works. So the whole point in working with the key risk indicators is you have multiple key risks by category: credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity, and you can look at each line and you can start developing your own dashboard, if you will, in terms of, so if ALLL levels need to be at policy level is 0.75 or a goal at 0.75, you can see how that would glow green. You can also take a look at loan mix. You can take a look at concentrations, and if you're going off of, say, regulatory guidelines, you can put regulatory guidelines in here. And you can also take a look, and so you can see where their CRE concentrations are a little elevated. They're there as well. And then you also have past dues and non-accruals. So you have a nice selection of key risk indicators that could quickly look at how you're doing, how your custom peer group ranks, where you are from a regulatory perspective using the UBPR data, as well as your own benchmarks. And you can do this in credit risk, interest rate risk, which has all of your major yields and costs. So if you want to look at what it costs to fund your earning assets, you can see, and these guys are doing very well, that costs them about 12 basis points to fund their earning assets, and you can see where they'll end up with that. So anyway, you have all your yields and costs, you have balance sheet composition, and then other key factors that would support interest rate risk analysis in terms of anything from maturity schedules, durations, things of that nature. So this particular app is great for risk management. It can also be used for strategic planning. By the way, if you ever see a bank in here that is curious to you for whatever reason, you can also click on the bank's name and it'll take you right to their their one-pager. So if you're doing some strategic planning and all of a sudden you see a bank listed that you're curious about, by all means, give it a click and you can get more data on that particular bank. So key takeaways here: 140 KRIs, strategic risk, where if you want to get into that money area or you want to have a quick discussion with some board members and they're just saying, hey, how are we doing in non-interest income? Boom, you can pull it up. How do we rank on ROA? It's there. How are we doing on net interest margin? As you can see, the data is fast. You can, again, put in your benchmarks and also looking at things like capital, asset growth, dividend rates, and even your 4 key capital rate, capital adequacy levels, such as Tier 1 and that basis. So you have key risk categories laid out pretty simply, and you can move through one through the other quite seamlessly. It'll always give you your data, custom peer group data, UBPR data, quarter over quarter, year over year. You can turn benchmarks on, you can turn them off. You can actually establish thresholds for your benchmarks, and you can always download all of these reports into Excel. Okay. Now, again, we talked about planning, so I'm going to pop into the Key Performance Analyzer. And this does a couple of things. First of all, it does default to your bank, and it's really tracking 8 key areas of performance: asset growth, loan growth, deposit growth, ROA, ROE, net interest margin, non-performing assets, efficiency, non-interest income, and non-interest bearing deposits. So each of those categories give you a rating. So if you're doing some strategic planning and you kind of want to get a sense of, gee, what do the loan growths look like in say, my state, and let's say in my asset group, and I'll make this up, let's just say you're a $250 to $500 million bank, and you want to look at top and bottom 10%, 25%, or 30%, it will rank them in those orders. So what basically in this particular case, the bank's asset growth is 39%. It also compares you, and if there's a positive variance or a negative variance, it'll show it. But what's really key here is it shows you who the top performers are, and it also shows you who the bottom performers are. So if you're doing some strategic planning, and let's say you wanted to look at some likely merger partners, or you're trying to get your arm around different things, you might want to use earnings as a perspective, right? So you can go ahead and take a look at ROA and say, I want to zero in on the maybe lower performing banks, or I want to just do some analysis. You can drop that into an Excel spreadsheet pretty quickly. Okay. And so, it's one thing to look at top performers. That's always interesting from a strategic planning standpoint, who's doing what and how. But also, if you're kind of interested in who's not doing as well, or who's struggling a little bit, or who might be a likely good acquisition target, you can also zero in on a kind of a bottoms-up perspective, right? And those key risk categories. So easily exportable. But if you ever just want to see who's kind of leading the pack, either in your state or in your asset classification, that's all available right here. Pretty much easy, point and shoot. If you want to save certain save certain searches because you've established search criteria, you can save the search. Everything's exportable. But a really handy tool to see, first of all, how you're doing against top performers, which is what this variance report does, but also who are the top and bottom performers. Always a useful planning tool. Okay. Now, for those of you on the enterprise risk management perspective, or those of you who might be CFOs or working on your bank's capital plan, the capital risk allocation model or analyzer is a very useful tool. What it does do is it lays out your capital position in 4 key capital ratios, right? So you've got Tier 1 leverage, common equity Tier 1, Tier 1 risk-based, and total capital, which used to be total risk-based capital. And by the way, you'll see our charts all the time. If you're ever doing a report and you need to export, or you need that chart to drop into some other document, you'll always have this little handy widget there where you can just click on it and it will either drop it into a whatever format you like, but it's a quick way to kind of get camera ready art on that image so that you can easily drop it into a presentation if you're doing some of your own custom presentations. But what's important about the the capital risk analyzer is you can actually you can develop what your risk profile is. So for those of you who are doing enterprise risk management, you probably have done some analysis on looking at your inherent risk and your adequacy of risk management, composite or residual risk, and direction. This allows you to drop your composite risk score in and also do your risk weightings and put policy levels in. You can even do some capital buffer allocation definitions and save it, but in the interest of time, I'll just open an existing scenario. And by the way, you can save as many scenarios as you want. For those of you who are OCC banks, for example, a lot of times, in many cases, you guys might be, well, when you get your annual exam, they tell you what their risk profile, what they say your risk profile is. If you want to drop their risk profile into this model, it'll work. And let me show you what you're able to do. So when we go to Tier 1 analyzer, for example, so we're looking at Tier 1, here's your risk profile, right? So we looked at credit risk, and if this were your profile, and this is your risk weighting, it gives you an implied minimum buffer. And that's kind of important from a risk management standpoint, because if you're a Fed member bank or an OC chartered bank particularly, they want to know if you're evaluating your risk profile and your capital adequacy in the same in some sort of form or fashion. This allows you to do that. So if you take a look at it from Tier 1 leverage, regulators or PCA well capitalized is 5, but based on your risk profile, it's suggesting that perhaps an additional 1.45% would be prudent, right? So an implied minimum, but your policy level is 8, so the implied minimum is well below policy, and the actual level is 10.8. So in this bank's case, it's a large bank, they have about $313 million in free capital. But if you think about this, whether you're looking at growth strategies, whether you're looking at dividend policies, if you're looking at stock buybacks for that matter, you can go to this model and it kind of lets you know where you are based on your risk profile, and then it gives you your actual dollars in terms of each of these considerations. So the key takeaway here is if you want to look at your risk profile and you actually want to review it in each one of the key categories, you can do that, total capital. And again, you can kind of see where your policy levels are, where your actual levels are, implied levels are for each. And if you're a CRE rich bank and you run CRE concentrations, this is really helpful to be able to take that into consideration. But and then on the dashboard, there's all 4 ratios on one page. Okay, so the key takeaway here is you can save as many scenarios as you like. Again, like everything else in the portal, it's exportable, and it makes for a perfect report. And like I said, if you're doing your capital planning, being able to talk to your capital adequacy based on your risk profile is an exceptional value add. Bank versus Bank Analyzer is a pretty straightforward tool. Many of you may, and this could be both either from a risk management planning or just an analysis tool. I know one of our clients, actually, their board likes to look at their bank versus 8 other banks. Now, we could do up to 5, so he actually has to do it like a 2-step process. But if you want to do a side-by-side comparison of income statement and balance sheet of you and any other bank, it's just key that before you can use this tool, so if you like the idea of comparing yourself to others, just remember you have to save banks to your favorites in order to be able to do this. Okay, so let's just say you've saved a number of banks to your favorites, and you can do up to 5 in one swipe. And you can see that you'll have detailed income statement, and it really does, all of these expand open. And you also have a complete balance sheet. You can toggle back and forth between dollars or ratios for comparison purposes. You can alter your periods. You can even close some windows if you don't want the excess windows open. But here's kind of an interesting little useful tool. If you happen to be, talking to a partner bank or maybe assessing a bank for merger purposes, you can just go to the combined bank selection, and I'm just going to say this bank is going to look at Bank of England. So what it instantly does is it merges the 2 banks' income statements and balance sheets and recalculates your ratios. Now that's kind of handy at just an eyeballing basis, but what makes it even easier to work with is you can immediately drop that into an Excel spreadsheet, and should pop up any second. There you go. And so it instantly gives you a detailed income statement and balance sheet. So for all those extra columns, you can just get rid of those, right? So here's a complete income statement of both banks side by side, the combined banks and the recalculated ratios. To the extent you wanted to do some what-if modeling, pretty easy, right? You've got a complete income statement, or I'm sorry, that's balance sheet, or income statement. So if you wanted to run some calculations on things like synergies or things of that nature, you could do that. And or if you wanted to take a look at the impact of your portfolio, be it earning assets, loan composition, or actual combined total equity. It's all right there in a matter of seconds or a minute or so. So the bank-to-bank analyzer, kind of in a nutshell, if you want to do side-by-side income statement and balance sheet comparisons with other banks, if you want to do some simple what-ifs at a fingertip, again, think about whether you're in a management committee meeting, a board meeting. Anybody can drive this engine. You don't need to send an analyst off to run a series of reports. You can pull it up in screen, and it's there available for use. Okay. Now let's take a look at the strategic forecasting model. So again, for you guys that are responsible for planning, this is a tool that allows you to do up to 6 years of planning. It's wizard driven, and once you develop your scenarios, you can look at different areas of those scenarios, and I'll show you what those look like. But the neatest thing about this tool, this is not a budgeting tool, guys. This is a tool that you can sit in a management committee meeting or a subcommittee meeting or even a board meeting. And if you want to do a series of what-ifs, it's basically wizard-driven, right? So it's going to take your last full year plus current quarter as a benchmark. So it pulls in your core data, and all you have to do is plug in your assumptions, right? Whether it's a net income assumption, an ROA assumption, you want to look at alternative dividend scenarios. If you want to model a capital raise, if you want to model an acquisition, if you want to mess around with your core capital levels or plug it in, but it's basically strategic planning level scenarios, right? And you plug them into the wizard. In the interest of time, I'll just open an existing one so we can kind of take a look at that. So we'll just do that. So it'll immediately populate the tables, right? So you have current year plus your years out. You can look at, and if you've got dividend scenarios in there, or if you have a bank equity or you're raising capital, that would pop in there. It gives you your actual capital levels. It gives you an estimated total risk-weighted capital, risk-weighted assets, total assets for leverage purpose, and total assets as reported. Then it also has your ratios, your ROA and ROE. But for those of you guys who are trying to figure out optimizing performance, it also has a complete equity analysis section that looks at book value, market value equity, as well as earnings per share and dividend payments scenarios for that planning horizon. So it's kind of a nice detailed way. This exports easily into Excel. And if you wanted to take that same scenario and look by year, and you're just saying, gosh, if we execute this scenario, this is what our total assets will look like. This is our ROA and ROE. Hey, here's our outstanding shares. But if I wanted to take a look at each year what my potential value could be from a book value perspective, it gives you book value per share in each of those years at each of those levels. Again, exportable. But if the outcome of the value creation is part of your strategic forecast, then isn't it nice to be able to say, well, what would it look like if we hit plan and the market's at 2x? What's that look like for us in year 3? It's at your fingertips. And then lastly, if you want to do some side-by-side comparisons, you can pull up all of your scenarios. So if I have a scenario 1, a scenario 2, and a scenario 3, I'll just arbitrarily a 3 somewhere, and you name them, and you can go all the way out to 8, and then choose the year you want to look at. So if you want to see how the plan looks in year 3, it gives you year 3 for each scenarios. These are all exportable to Excel as well. And it gives you your total assets. It gives you your average growth rate, net income, Tier 1 leverage ratio, total capital ratio, ROA, ROE, book value, market value equity, earnings per share, dividends per share, and shares outstanding. And if you really think about and the reason we call it the strategic forecasting model, those are kind of the questions we want to at least ask and answer initially as we're developing our strategy. How much growth do we think we can achieve, or do we want to achieve? What kind of earnings are we looking for? And if we go for that, is our capital adequate? Do we need more capital? What can our shareholders expect in dividends? What can we expect in value creation? Those are the types of questions good planning has to answer before you get down and drill down into the weeds. So it's kind of a very useful tool to do your forecasting, value evaluations, and summary of scenarios. And again, and these all export to Excel. You can save as many scenarios as you like. Now, I don't know how many of you would find yourself having to go into the call report. And I'm sorry, I kind of just jumped right in there. And we're down to our last two widgets, guys, so we're coming close to home. But if you have to ever do any kind of call report analysis on your own bank or on others, on behalf of management or somebody else, what we've done is we've digitized the call report. And what that simply means is we've taken all of the schedules, and whether you want to look at quarter over quarter, year over year, they are all at your fingertip. So let's something simple we can all understand. We want to look at loans and leases, which is Schedule RCC. I can click on Schedule RCC, and first and foremost, it's given me, 5 most consecutive quarters or 4 most consecutive years plus current quarter, and I've got my complete loan portfolio. Now, what's handy about this, though, is there's addendums to these schedules, right? For example, your small business loan addendum, or your loans restructured in TDRs scenario, or if you're even looking at maturity analysis and repricing. And those all drop in. Again, you can look at them at year over year or quarter over quarter. But at a fingertip, this used to be pretty difficult to do. And though it's historical data, it's just at your fingertip. And what's nice about this entire app, so what we've done is we've just looked at a $10 billion bank's loan portfolio. In a matter of seconds, we've just exported it into Excel. So there's the entire portfolio. There's that small business addendum. There's the loan restructurings and TDRs. And then there's maturity and repricing in a matter of seconds. So for those of you who perhaps have had to do call report analysis, or you've had to go to an analyst to do this stuff for you, you can now have it at your fingertip 24/7, whether you're looking at income statement, capital adequacy, credit quality, past dues, non-accruals, whatever you're interested in as it relates to call report for your bank or others. And if the bank is saved to your favorites, it's also there as well. And so you do have those available to you. And so again, handy if you do call report. Last one, again, for you planners. And a lot of times you get into situations where you're trying to do some what-if analysis, right? And so if we're Citizens Bank and we're looking at things like earnings and performance, or we're looking at expenses, or we're looking at our asset quality, yields and costs, capital ratios, loan composition and mix, deposit composition, or liquidity. And let's say, well, I'll start from the top, but let's just do something simple. You want to increase your earnings to a certain level. You're running at 145 and you want to get to 175. And by the way, the peer average is 127 and the national average is 136. So right off the bat, Citizens Bank is able to determine that they do 19 million better than their peer group and 9 million better than the national peer group. But if they wanted to get to 175, they need to increase their net income by $59 million. So again, just the basic concept here is, what are your target ratios that are your key measures for performance and risk management? And how do I take those ratios and quickly monetize them so I could plan against it? So if I know that my yields aren't where I want them to be, I can come in and say, well, where do I want them to be? And kind of say, geez, I thought 4% would be an easy road, but 4%, I have to come up with 24 million in additional yields in order to get to a 4. And so again, if you're looking at expenses and you want to get your income, your personnel expense down, your occupancy, or if you're looking at those as ratios, you can plug any one of them in and convert it to capital, right? Or I should say to financial numbers. And if you want to increase your DDA penetration, now this bank is kind of hard. 58% of their deposits are in non-interest bearing accounts. But if they wanted to move the portfolio around, you could do that. If you wanted to do some liquidity testing, you could do that as well. And if your policy is at 50, let's say your policy is 15%, you're running at 10, and then you just save that benchmark, this bank would have to come up with $461 million in deposits to get their liquidity ratio to 15, because that'd be closer to peer average. So again, a very useful planning tool, and one that if you're in strategic planning or business performance planning, real simple to go in here. Everything's exportable again. You can run different periods of time, but a real nice way to do some forecasting and do some what if scenarios. We call that the gap analyzer. So that may have been a very quick walkthrough, and hopefully that you got some keen insights to what is available. Again, whether you're doing risk management or planning, these tools are just designed for any executive or senior leader, manager, or staff person not to have to go through monster training to get their hands on some good analytics or some simple models that can make your job more effective, right? Useful tools. And then the one thing I did want to share with you with kind of where things are going, we will be adding new analytics to the platform. But in addition to new analytics, for those of you who are our ERM clients, we're in the midst of working on the next generation of automation on the entire enterprise risk assessment suite. So you'll actually be able to go into, and we do have a working beta site here, where you'll be able to go in, you'll be able to assign permissions for risk owners and risk users. You'll be able to go in by risk category and access, and you can even have your own custom assessments, but you'll be able to access all assessments. So for you compliance folks, if you need to assign somebody to BSA, you can say BSA person, go in here. And it's real simple. They select what it is they're assessing. They slide the bar over as to the level of risk that they're calculating, what the direction of that risk is. You'll have your complete history from previous periods. You'll be able to make comments that support the assessment. You'll be able to identify emerging risk associated with that, make comments on that. It will give you a history of who the heck's been in here and what they were doing. And also if you want to attach some documents that support it. But very user-friendly. I can't say this is going to be the final. I'm not totally crazy about how this slider bar is working yet. But from an inherent risk, adequacy of risk management, you're going to be able to navigate the assessments at the risk owner and risk participant level, and then it'll aggregate up to a dashboard. And then the custom reporting is awesome. You'll be able to quickly identify where your top risks are, have a full comprehensive enterprise risk assessment report. You'll be able to do trend analysis and custom, whether you want to look at the emerging risk and what you should be losing sleep over, or what you're not losing sleep over, or where your top inherent risk resides or your weakest areas are. You'll be able to sort by any of those data fields and quickly create an ad hoc report to make your job a little friendlier. And so I did want to share with those of you who are in our ERM practice side what's coming down the pike. So that pretty much wraps up the training. I kind of hope you found that we continue to invest in the system. Some of the things you can look forward to as far as additions in the on the app side is market share data, a simple CECL model, a simple credit risk or credit stress testing model. Those are the next 3 generations that will be added to the portal. You're probably looking at 4th quarter on those because, to be honest, our research or our technology team right now is responding to my needs to get this ERM solution or this assessment platform up. But it is our commitment to continue to invest in automated solutions that make your ability to make decisions or run scenarios or conduct risk management in a efficient, accurate, and useful manner. And that's kind of what it's all about for us. So for those of you who aren't a customer in any one area other than CB Bank Analytics, this is what we do, guys. It's our business to work with you and help make sure that your risk priorities and your performance priorities are synchronized, and that comes in the form of whether it's enterprise risk, strategic planning, or capital planning. That's what we do. That's all we do, and it's our mission to make sure that the inputs, the throughputs, and the outputs are accurate and useful. And so that concludes our orientation period. I don't know, we went through a lot of things pretty quickly. Don't know if there's any questions out there. As I mentioned, this will be available in a recorded fashion, and it will be in the portal. So with that, that kind of concludes the formal presentation part. Any questions? Okay. So one question I got was kind of a straightforward one, but a good one. I'm going to just go into the portal here for a second. And it's really more of an admin question. And it's how do you add or delete users if you're the administrator? And I think some of you online might be new administrators at the bank. So simply go into your settings and select admin. And you can always add users, but you can also manage users. But it's all right here. So pretty straightforward. Go into admin. You can add or delete. And I would, from a best practice standpoint, guys, please keep an inventory of who your users are. Should they leave the bank or whatever, you want to be able to go in there and scrub your users from time to time. You can make them inactive, and this is also where you would assign permissions in the enterprise risk management platform. So that would be that. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. If you have any other questions, or if you would like a kind of a hands-on or a custom orientation and training program for you and your employees in this format, but maybe a little slower with more questions and answers, by all means, we're available for that. Just let John or any of our key contact people know, or Robert, and we'll get that set up for you. Thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I hope you find the applications useful. And tell us what you want, if you would. Please send me a note, or Robert or John or Frank or anybody you're in contact with here at the company. It is our mission to support your ability to plan and manage risk effectively. And if there's something you think we can provide that make us better and make your life better, we certainly want to hear it. So thank you again, and have a great day.